Welcome to the Intellectual Medicine Podcast with Dr. Stephen Petteruti, where we explore cutting-edge approaches to anti-aging, weight loss, and hormone optimization. Dr. Petteruti shares expert insights to help you live longer, healthier, and more vibrant lives. Tune in for actionable tips and the latest in personalized medicine.
Well, hey gang, by some estimates, we got to talk about this, right? We got to talk about GLP-1 drugs, also known as Ozempic, also known as semaglutide, tirzepatide, Wegovy. 1 out of 8 Americans are reportedly on one of these agents. Is that great? Is it helpful? Well, we need to reflect upon that, right? What do you do when the drug stops working? What do you do when you're off the drug? These are inevitable bridges to cross, and I don't think we've really prepared ourselves for what comes next. When you take a GLP-1 drug, it works on the hypothalamus. That's the part of the brain where desire lives, desire for carbohydrate. We are all driven to want carbohydrate. It's primitive behavior. Carbohydrate, sweet foods are built in to our brain's desire patterns because in prehistoric times, we couldn't read labels. Man needed to eat food based upon how it tasted, and sweet food equated to high carb, high energy. Energy is life, right? You can function without a lung. You can function without a kidney. You turn off the energy, you die. This is why fat cells are so thoroughly preserved, and this is why they're so hard to get rid of. So here we are in America, and I'm glad that we are medicalizing this concern to a degree. I'm pleased we are starting to recognize what the AMA identified years ago and declared as a medical condition. For too long, people battling their obesity have been blamed for being weak, lazy, have been blamed for being ignorant. If you simply know what to eat and eat it, you will not be fat. That, folks, is not true. We're all born with a different metabolic profile, and some folks grow fat really, really well, and it doesn't take much. We're very efficient. So on that level, this has been a little bit of a revelation. Look, I've been doing weight loss treatment for 30 years. We've been using GLP-1 drugs for at least 10 to 15 years. We knew they helped with weight loss before they had the FDA approval. It's necessary for specialists in weight loss treatment like myself to use drugs off-label because there just are not that many good weight loss drugs out there. So here comes a GLP-1, and you know what it is? This is disturbing to me. It's a gold rush. You go online and you can buy it from anywhere, and they'll ship it to you with scant information about how to use it, when to use it, with precious little to nothing about how to eat properly so you don't hurt yourself. Listen, losing weight does not correlate with a health benefit. Never has, never will. Losing fat, that may have benefit. But when you take a drug, a GLP-1 drug, or for that matter, any drug, or you go on any diet, if you're losing weight and you're not cognizant about what you're losing, you're flying blind. You must be aware, is the fat going down or not? Problems. So we're going to talk about hitting the wall, right? What happens when the drug stops working? We're going to talk about that. But even as it's working, and I'm using that with floating quotes, what is working? Well, it blocks the craving. It makes you not want to eat on some level. It slows down gastric motility, so the food doesn't move through the gut quite so fast. It alters the way sugar's metabolized, making the insulin less prominent. So all these things come together in a manner that helps you to not want to eat. So some folks say, hey, this is awesome. I'm not hungry. I can eat once a day. Here's a flash. If you don't eat at least 3 times a day, the likelihood is you're going to shrink muscle because that's what it takes to keep the muscle fueled. It's really hard to eat once a day and hold on to your muscle mass. And if you lose muscle, you're going to lose bone with it. And if you lose bone, it increases risks of everything from heart disease to dementia to osteoporosis to fractures, a delayed negative consequence. Do not lose your bone. There's nothing unique about these drugs that compels the body to lose muscle. It has more to do with inadequate protein consumption. How much should you eat? Rule of thumb, between 1 and 2 grams per body weight per day. So I'm a 200-pound human being. If I want to eat 200 grams of protein per day, do the math and divide it out to each feeding time, what we call meals, and it'll give you a rough sketch about where you want to try to be. Now, there's variation within that recommendation. The point is multiple feeding times, protein-centered, complete protein, and then you can preserve your muscle. If you're just riding the wave, bumping up that Ozempic, now comes the real tough part. You started out at 250 pounds. Your goal is to get to, let's say 170. And now you're at 210. And you've lost good weight using your drug. But it stops working. It always does. The brain doesn't sit idly, letting you shrink that fat away. Your brain thinks you're dying. You're losing fat. What happens when people die? They shrink, they wither, and then they die. When you look at studies done on a community-wide basis, people that are losing weight have a higher death rate, and that's because it captures illness in addition to folks dieting. When you look at outcomes, there's something called the obesity paradox. When someone has a heart attack, if they're thin, their likelihood of death is greater than if they're heavy. Now, that's not to encourage you folks to stay obese for the sake of preparing for your heart attack so you survive it. The healthy nutritional patterns can lower your risk of a cardiovascular event like a heart attack. The point is that a little bit of fat is an energy reserve that can serve us in times of high stress. That's why your brain wants to keep the fat. That's why when you're mentally stressed, your body grows fat. You desire sweet, carb food because the brain is seeking reserve comfort and stability. That's why when you're sick, you grow fat. Stress, illness, injury, all are instigators for fat growing. So here comes the Ozempic. This is great. I'm losing weight like crazy. There's something called the false hope syndrome. This was described many years ago by psychologists, and it goes something like this. You make up your mind you're going to lose weight. You start your Ozempic, you start your diet, weight's coming down, you're encouraged, motivated, this is great. Then it slows down a little bit. You try harder, maybe increase the dose, maybe you exercise more. But the weight plateaus. You cannot maintain an effort in the face of negative feedback or the absence of positive feedback. This is a universal trait of human behavior. If I'm not getting rewarded for my effort, screw it, I'm going to have a bagel, right? You might as well, you're not losing weight with all this dieting and exercise. Well, what happens when you hit that Ozempic wall? I'm going to call it an Ozempic wall, but it applies to any of the other drugs. 100%, it's out there waiting. This is what the brain does. It defeats the pharmacologic intervention. At that point, there needs to be a shift in tactic. In intellectual medicine, we refer to this as sequential polypharmacy. It simply means when the brain figures out what you're doing to it and finds a way around it, you can't keep banging the same note on the piano. You got to shift gears. A skilled clinician, knowledgeable about weight loss treatment and pharmacology, can go there with you, can change the agent if needed, can alter the dose when needed, can modify the approach, can use supplements where they have value in order to preserve your health. What happens if people go on too aggressive a weight loss pattern? You can lose your hair, it can shed. Often that's associated with a low zinc level. Sometimes the stress of weight loss itself can do that to you. So we want to be prepared for the plateau. Working with a clinician who's knowledgeable about managing weight loss pharmacology, who's knowledgeable about nutritional behavioral change. Not a diet, folks. Not a diet. You must acquire a pattern of eating that is different than what you've done previously if you want to maintain a lower weight. That pattern of eating should include at least 3 feeding times per day, as I mentioned. More is better. It should include premeditated portion. How do you know when to stop eating? It's a bit of a trick question. The answer is not when you're full. There's a hole at the top, there's a hole at the bottom. You're not filling anything, folks. You may become temporarily uncomfortable, but to eat until you're full is a fool's objective. You eat until the food runs out. This is universal. So if that's how we eat, and if the food never runs out, we got a problem. You have to create artificial firewalls. You have to create premeditated portions so that you will run out of food, making it inconvenient to continue your eating pattern. So that's a cornerstone, feeding times, running out of food, making it such that this becomes a sustainable nutritional pattern. This sustainable nutritional pattern, in order to defeat the plateau that is waiting for you, in addition to pharmacologic sequential polypharmacy, you must also make sure you incorporate hedonism. Well, what does that mean? It means fun stuff. Look, there are 2 things every human being does. 2. They're built into our brain very deeply. 1 is pursue pleasure. The other is avoid pain. 2 things. Pursue pleasure means reproduce. Avoid pain means don't die. This has propagated our species. It translates into food in a similar fashion. Austerity diets always fail. I'm not going to drink any wine until I reach my target weight, saith some people. That is a fool's errand. You want to lose weight in a manner that is how you're going to live. If you love ice cream and you can't really imagine a life without it, you need to have ice cream as part of your weekly plan. Now, everybody likes carb, but certain things are flat out hedonisms. I define that thusly: something that you would be saddened if you could never eat it again. Not that you don't mind getting rid of it. I'll give you examples in my own life. Potato chips, everybody likes them. Well, most people, right? They're crunchy, they're salty. What's not to like? They are like not really food. You know that, don't you, right? They're like totally junk. However, I can live without potato chips, doesn't really bother me. But if you said to me, you know, doc, you can never have another glass of wine the rest of your life because it's bad for you, man, I'm not signing up for that diet. I kind of like a glass of wine now and then, and I really don't fashion a life without it personally. Whether it's wine, ice cream, chocolate, cookies, you must identify your hedonism, and then you got to premeditate it, right? How much, how often? Most typically, it's maybe twice a week, maybe once a week. Most typically, it's got to be premeditated. Try not to have it in your house, because if it's in your house, it's hard to regulate the volume. You like ice cream, do not buy a gallon, stick it in the freezer. Go to the ice cream store. Same for French fries, same for cookies. Don't buy a sleeve of Chips Ahoy and stick them in your cabinet. You're not going to be able to control the intake. Go to the cookie store and buy a cookie. And for God's sakes, do not ruin your hedonism by trying to commingle it with some type of diet. You do not, if you like ice cream, you don't eat the non-fat ice cream, sugar-free. No, you eat like the Haagen-Dazs rich stuff. If you like wine, you do not drink the skinny girl wine. You drink the stuff that is what you like. That's the definition of hedonism. And that'll make your journey sustainable. So avoiding the wall, or when you hit the wall, you've got to analyze what you're doing as well nutritionally. If you are eating, let's say, and I like to have food scales for my people. particularly as you get started, because your eyes cannot discern how much you're going to eat. You know that old adage, well, just a palm-sized meat. I had a patient in my weight loss group, and she was frustrated because she was not losing weight. She said, I don't understand it. I just eat a palm size. That's it. I said, do me a favor when you go home, take that palm size and weigh it. It was 8 ounces. Folks, 8 ounces of meat is 2 meals for most of you. The palm can mislead. The scale is honest. If you're taking much more than 4 ounces of your protein in the form of chicken, fish, steak, anything, it's likely too much. There are not too many human beings who need that much protein to get along. There's 8 grams of protein in each ounce of meat. Let's define meat as anything that grows on an animal. So 4 ounces are going to give you 32 grams. That's a pretty good load. Maybe you can stretch it if you're a big person doing a lot of strength training. So avoiding the Ozempic wall. Now, what happens when you're at the end of the treatment cycle? You're now at your target weight. Hooray, I'm at my target weight. You don't quit. You will need your pharmacologic treatment sporadically, intermittently, long term. The drugs do not need to be used nonstop, but you can, upon achieving your target, start to do it every other week. You can come off of it entirely. Track your weight. When it goes up 3 to 5 pounds, you go right back to a cycle of drug treatment. The mistake is to believe that you can achieve your target weight, eat sensibly, and maintain that weight. Eating sensibly is a prelude to fat growth. Eating sensibly drifts you back to where you came from. It's called regression to the mean. I like having fancy terms to describe common things, right? Going back to where you came from. That's what you don't want. Look, your intellect, your frontal lobe, is not going to win the battle. It's the primitive brain we're up against, and that requires premeditation to prevent us from rationalizing. Hey, I've done this. I'm feeling kind of hungry today. Maybe I should eat a little more than usual. That's my frontal lobe fooling me and convincing me to take more than what I need. Oh, I know, I exercised this morning. Maybe I can eat a little more. No, 100 times no. The amount of a calorie of energy you burn exercising is like a peanut. You cannot exercise fat off your body. Cannot be done. Now, I like exercise. I partake of it. I encourage you to consider it. But do not think that you're going to pound on that treadmill an extra 10 minutes a day and shed fat. It never happens. It's a nice adjunct. It's a nice add-on. But you're better off spending those extra 10 minutes planning the meals for the next day. Avoid the Ozempic wall. In order to do that, you must incorporate nutritional behavioral change. Avoid the Ozempic wall. In order to do that, you want to work with a clinician who has the knowledge and the breadth that can shift into other pharmacologic treatments when the Ozempic fails you, and can even combine them with other drugs when the Ozempic fails you. To do this, you may need to work outside of the realm of conventional medicine. If you have a caring family doc who's dedicated to this task, good for you. Hold on to them tightly. But if you have an online prescribing service, good luck. I think that is not very commonly adequate. There may be some out there that have fantastic nutritional guidance. I haven't seen many. I think people have crowded the space. They're looking to capitalize on the boom, if you will, until it burns out. Same thing with the drug company. They need to capitalize on the boom. They got to get their return on investment in the next 3 years before, something kind of goes not so good. So we've entered the pharmacologic age of weight management. This is a positive step when, and only when, it is combined with nutritional behavioral change. To do the pharmacology in a vacuum is to invite negative consequence. You'll lose weight, you'll shrink muscle, you will be less healthy. Combine these things together, you can avoid the Ozempic wall, And remember, this is a lifetime condition. It is a chronic relapsing phenomenon. Now, maybe someday in the distant future, we will source our food in a manner that is consistent with our best health. Maybe someday in the distant future, supermarkets will be stocked with nothing but healthy food, and maybe a little junk scattered hither and yon. Don't hold your breath, and don't wait for the government to fix this. It's not coming top down. The market responds to what you buy. You don't have to buy the stuff, but remember, your primitive brain will drive you to that end point. So in the course of your weight loss journey, you want to be thoughtful about maintaining and periodically reviewing the nutritional behavioral change. I'll help you. I'll give you some tips as best I can. And you got a few during this podcast, right? We'll continue to weave this into our conversation. So feeding times, absolutely. Minimum of 3. Protein, yes. 1 to 2 grams per body weight per day. How about fiber? Aiming between 20 and 40 grams of fiber, milligrams of fiber per day, or grams of fiber per day. That translates into about 5 per feeding time. Where's the fiber? Unfortunately, it's not in that protein. The fiber is in broccoli, very high. It's in avocado, very high. It is in some of the fruits are okay, like strawberries, raspberries, but be careful. Fruit is very fattening. The idea of it being a healthy food is mislabeled. It is high in fructose, high in carb, may be a problem. So avoid the Ozempic wall. Start now. Premeditate. I've had folks use their phone alarm to remind them when feeding time happens. So hunger should not be your trigger for eating. Once upon a time, there was this belief that you could eat intuitively by responding to your hunger. That's nonsense. Hunger is desire. It is a stimulus from your brain telling your frontal lobe that it wants something. The primitive brain is saying, hey, I'm bored. Hey, I'm hungry. Hey, I want entertainment. Hey, I'm stressed. All those different sensations can manifest as hunger. Sometimes even thirst can manifest as hunger. Joy can manifest as hunger, a desire. So don't think of hunger as a call for food. It is a desire that your primitive brain wants some attention. So don't eat just because you're hungry. You eat when the clock tells you it's time to eat. You premeditate when you're going to eat. You do not have any snacks. Eating between meals grows fat. I don't care what you eat, unless you're eating cucumbers or broccoli, that you can get away with. But if you're having, let's say a protein bar between meals to take the edge off your hunger, you're going to grow fat. What to do if you're having a lot of hunger throughout the day? Make more feeding times. The more times you eat in a premeditated fashion, the more likely you are to shed fat and hold muscle. 3 feeding times is a minimum. I've had people doing as many as 6. I personally do them every 3 hours. In fact, I'm due right now, so I'm going to have to wrap this podcast up because I got a feeding time on the horizon, and this is getting in my way. Can't let that happen. We've got to be dedicated to our pursuit. Having a good quality protein powder can be your friend. But for God's sakes, suspend this notion that your fruit smoothie is good for you. It's not. If you put fruit into a blender, you're concentrating sugar, stripping out fiber. It is a fat bomb waiting to happen. Protein shake, yes. A protein shake with lots of berries and bananas, no. That is a fat bomb. So I hope this has been helpful to you. I applaud your use of pharmacotherapy to get your weight down, but let's be sensible about holding on to muscle and bone. Muscle goes down, bone goes down, risk of cognitive impairment goes up, risk of cardiovascular disease goes up, risk of immune weakness goes up. The goal, folks, is to achieve your best weight, not some predetermined chart-driven, what other people think you ought to weigh. Look, if you start out at 300 pounds, you're not going to end up skinny at the end. You're going to end up healthy big. And if you start out at, 180 and your goal is to get to 110, it's not unreasonable if and only if you're analyzing the percent body fat. If you're doing weight loss without the means of evaluating percent body fat, find a body analyzer. They're not that hard to come upon. Many of the gyms have them. And track what you're losing. There's some decent home equipment that can do the job too. So avoid the Ozempic wall. Be aware of the ending of the Ozempic treatment cycle. Be cognizant of the fact that once you achieve your target weight, the use of pharmacology will become a forever thing, or at least a long-term thing. Look, in some cases, I've seen folks go 3 months, 6 months, maybe even a year without any pharmacologic support. But it's going to come back. And I share that with you not to discourage you, not to make you feel like you failed, but to acknowledge the reality of the metabolic process and to make you feel at ease when the weight's coming back, to go back to your doctor to resume the medication before it gets out of hand. Don't wait. You go up 5 pounds, you say, I'm going to try harder. Yeah, well, that's fine, but get the medicine going at the same time. So in the spirit of keeping you guys lean, because we know that's foundational to living long, living youthful, and living vital. And in intellectual medicine, we're focusing on your vital living, anti-aging primary care. That's the path to walk. Living longer is pretty awesome, only if you bring your brain and your energy with you. To do that, percent body fat reduction is awesome, but you got to do it the right way, folks. Avoid the Ozempic wall and be prepared for the exit strategy. Well, thanks for your time. I enjoyed chatting with you guys, and I'll see you next time.